Your Dog's Friend is a nonprofit 501c3 whose mission is to help keep dogs out of shelters by educating and supporting their humans. We promote positive method of training and behavior modification through stress-free methods. As part of that mission, we offer free webinars like the one you're about to watch. Subjects range from dog behavior, stress-free training, and other tools to help you understand your relationship with your dog. If you like the webinar, be sure to give us a thumbs up. Click the notification bell and subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you'll be notified when future videos are posted. Now enjoy the webinar.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another webinar sponsored by Your Dog's Friend. Our speaker today, Pennye Jones-Napier, is the co-owner of the Big Bad Woof, an independent pet store in the Washington, D.C. metro area that specializes in raw and premium pet foods. For those of us who are local, they have a store in Tacoma, D.C., and a robust delivery and shipping service. They also have free deliveries to local Woof pantries where you can pick up your orders. Pennye and her partner have been in business for 18 years, and they carefully research all of the foods and treats that the Big Bad Woof carries. Please put your questions in chat. We will try to answer as many as possible at the end. And for those of you who don't know, Your Dog's Friend is a nonprofit, and your donations help support these webinars and our other free services. Please consider going to the homepage of our website, yourdogsfriend.org, where you will see a donations icon in the top right corner. We appreciate your support. I know that we will all learn a lot from today's webinar, and it's all yours, Pennye.
Thank you so much. And I just want to say many thanks to Your Dog's Friend for inviting me back to share some of the knowledge on pet nutrition that I've garnered over the years. This particular topic, food as medicine, has a place near and dear to my heart, as we have witnessed transformative change in our customers' animals over the years, and our own, simply by gently shifting the diet being fed from ultra-processed food to whole foods. In this talk today, I'm going to share a couple of case studies which we are witnessing the power of food to positively alter right now with these dogs' health. One of them is one of my foster dogs. Just like every person has different dietary needs, so is the case for our animal companions. There's not a single diet out there that will fit every dog or cat, but in working with our customers, we've learned to listen and try and determine what's going to be the best course of action. With all the different theories out there on foods and what you should feed, one thing is for certain: we all want the best for our pets. So I do want to say that I'm going to be talking a lot about foods, obviously. I know that the animal microbiome may be one of the most important ways in which we can influence our dog's immunity and overall health. Affecting the microbiome positively can have long-term and far-reaching effects, not only for acute illness, but for good overall vitality and longevity. The gut provides 70 to 90% of immunity builders for our beloved pets. And if we can provide healthful additions via food to improve the gut health of our animals, we can restore and maintain better health throughout their lives. I am going to be talking about some of these types of minimally processed foods and whole nutrition, raw dairy products, raw frozen diets, lightly cooked diets, which are becoming more and more popular, and freeze-dried, dehydrated, and air-dried. So I'm going to talk a little bit about animal microbiomes, or a lot about that, but we are also going to discuss some of the more common issues our customers ask us about. These include skin and coat issues, food intolerance, allergies, liver and kidney issues, and overall how to support their animals from puppyhood to adulthood. I'm going to ask you to feel free to ask questions, and we will do as much as we can to get to all of the questions at the end as possible. So on this slide, you'll see this is the picture of a healthy microbiome for a dog. Poop is, we talk poop all the time at the store. It's very important. The microbiome, as I've said, helps support healthy skin and the immune system. Oral health is also a really important part of maintaining a good immunity and maintaining good GI function. Right now, we have more information about animal microbiomes than we've ever had. Scientists are still working on how they understand the full impact of the role that it plays in a dog's overall health, but it's critically important for nutrient absorption, body condition, and hormonal responses, which feed into behavior, as well as maintaining health in terms of any kind of metabolic disease. Modern society right now is seeing a big rise in microbiome-associated disorders in our dogs, and I would say in ourselves as well. This is because we have many more commercial pet diets. Medications, particularly antibiotics, can have a deleterious effect on the dog microbiome. And also, we're indoors a lot more. The type of antimicrobial cleaners we use. There's all sorts of things that can influence how well the microbiome is performing on any given day. It's a dynamic environment, and there are a lot of species that live in there that can fluctuate, again, depending upon diet, medication, exercise, and environmental exposures. Dysbiosis is when things go wonky, just to put it in simple terms. You may have a number of acute symptoms like diarrhea and constipation, skin and immune health problems, bad breath, vomiting, gas, bloating, and these can turn into long-term chronic issues if they're not treated. Let me just dial back a minute and talk to you about what dysbiosis is. Dysbiosis is defined as an imbalance in the gut microbial community, and it's associated with disease, whether acute or chronic. This could be due to a gain or loss of bacterial community members or changes in the abundance of how many microbes are in the gut itself. There are a lot of neat diseases and health conditions connected to these issues. If your dog has bad breath, as an example, there are tests that humans take to try and see the onset of disease in a non-invasive way. Some of the more well-known connections that are used in humans right now are tests for diabetes, liver disease, and kidney. So diabetes can cause a buildup of ketones. That's a byproduct where the body is breaking down fat instead of glucose, and it results in a breath smelling sweet, fruity, or like nail polish remover. Dog diabetes can result in high sugar levels, increased sugar content of saliva, and odor-producing bacteria. So that's where you could get this issue of bad breath from. Liver disease can cause the breath to smell musty or like a dead animal. This is because the liver is not able to properly filter out toxins. So this stinky sulfur compound gets released into the lungs and then is exhibited out through the breath. Kidney disease can result in high urea levels in the body, causing the breath to smell like urine or fish. Kidneys are also a really important organ in filtering out all sorts of toxins in the body. So this is some of the internal issues that can happen. One of the common ones that we get is food intolerance, or I'm sorry, let me go back to restoring the microbiome. we can pretty easily, and I'll show you this in some of the examples of the case studies, restore the microbiome in 4 steps. The first thing is that we now have tests that are able to be gotten fairly easily. Animal biome is one, where you can send in sample and have them test the bacteria in the gut to see what is living in your dog's poop. But even if you don't want to go through testing and you want to just try and restore the gut, adding prebiotics and probiotics are a great way and an easy way to do that. We will talk more about what those are comprised of. Fermented foods is another one, and feeding whole foods is another way to restore good bacteria in the gut. Removing the bacteriophages, and that means bacteria eaters. They are naturally occurring organisms that attack and kill particular kinds of bacteria. So think about it in terms of you have good bacteria and bad bacteria. And disease occurs when the bad bacteria overtakes the good bacteria in the gut. So what we're trying to do is do a rebalancing act and get the good bacteria to be in excess of the bad bacteria. This brings the gut back to good health, and that in turn helps prevent common illnesses. It boosts the immune system so that your dog doesn't get sick as easily, and it influences a good gut biome. So I'm going to talk for a minute about prebiotics and probiotics. We throw these terms around a lot in our store, but I think sometimes people don't know exactly what they are. So prebiotics, they're non-digestible compounds. They help modulate the composition of activity in the microbiota, which is a fancy word for gut health. Some examples are wheat starch, beet pulp, inulin, non-starch polysaccharides, fructooligosaccharides, and galacto-oligosaccharides. Some of the most common whole food additives to build good gut health are pumpkin and sweet potato. And if your dog has ever had an upset stomach and you've talked to somebody have asked them how to restore it, pumpkin or sweet potato is probably going to be one of the first things that they go to. What happens is when you put these non-digestible compounds in, it generates large amounts of short-chain fatty acids. It also helps induce anti-inflammatory cells like T cells. Prebiotics serve to protect the gut epithelium, which is the lining, and it increases the mucus layer. Probiotics are the cultures of living bacteria that, when you give them to your animal, may improve the health of the gut. More common ones are lactobacilli and bifidobacteria. They're commonly used in commercial probiotics, and they appear to reduce susceptibility to diarrhea and respiratory tract infections. There have been studies that show that using antibiotics to treat inflammatory bowel disease, protein-losing enteropathy, and chronic diarrhea is also effective. So in terms of modifying animal health, the gut microbiota is probably best affected by long-term dietary changes. This is according to the veterinary manual. Now, there are a lot of supplements that contain prebiotic fibers. I'm going to talk about those, but some of the other foods that are naturally containing in prebiotics are in raw versions of some of the following. Leeks, asparagus, you don't want to feed leeks. Garlic you can feed in small amounts. Asparagus, Jerusalem artichokes, dandelion greens, bananas, seaweed. Fruits, vegetables, beans, and whole grains like wheat, oat, and barley are all good sources of prebiotic fibers. Be aware, though, that if you're doing a high intake of prebiotic foods, especially if they're introduced really suddenly. They can increase gas production and bloating. So I always tell people that they're going to start out, especially if they have animals that have been diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome, they should introduce these foods in small amounts to see if they can be tolerated. And lightly steaming them at first will also help cut down on any type of stomach upset like gas or bloating that they may experience. Fermented foods. So fermented foods are some of the oldest ways in which we see processes that are foundational be developed. This is where you have foods that are being consumed by microorganisms and converted into other compounds. Your dogs can benefit greatly from fermented foods if you can get them to partake. Now, my pit bull who recently passed, you could give her fermented foods and she would gobble them up. Our newest dog is not so fond of them, but getting them to eat yogurt and kefir may be one of the easiest ways to get a fermented product into them. And if you're going to ferment veggies, no onions. That includes leeks. So just be careful. But fermented foods are so healthy for the animal microbiome, and that includes our own, by improving digestion. They're very rich in enzymes. They increase the vitamin content in the food, and they're full of probiotics. I'm going to talk a little bit about allergies and food intolerance. So this is one of the most common things that people come into our store asking about. Common signs of food intolerance are in this graphic. You can see waxy discharge in the ear, odor, redness. You'll see your dog scratching or rubbing the ears with paws or against furniture. The muzzle, the chin, and areas around the eyes can become red with hair loss. Scratching or rubbing the face against furniture, again, clear signs that there's an irritation going on. The skin may be reddened. If you've got a short-haired dog, you might see crustiness or scales. If there's odor, it generally indicates a secondary infection. And again, you'll see a lot of scratching and licking of the belly, the elbows, the groin. The feet can show inflammation, redness, odor. I know I'm a person that smells my dog's feet. And you may see a brown discoloration where licking has occurred. They may actually chew their feet if there's a lot of buildup, especially with yeast. And the hair coat might have bald spots. You might have brown discoloration where the licking has occurred. And again, a lot of rubbing, licking, rubbing against furniture or the carpet. These are all common. So dogs can be allergic to almost any type of protein. Common allergens include beef, chicken, certain grains like corn, but it can be nearly anything. I do want to just say right now that if you have a dog who has a chicken allergy or a chicken intolerance to chicken as a protein, chicken fat is not a protein. So if you're feeding a food that has chicken fat in it, it should not cause a reaction because there shouldn't be any protein in that chicken fat itself. One of the ways that veterinarians and we suggest is elimination diets. You can change the diet, take it down to its simplest form to try and help clear symptoms and let the interior start to take place. And again, this is where that microbiome comes into play. As you start to let the microbiome heal, it'll work its way from the inside out and start to calm down the external symptoms that you're seeing. You also have over-the-counter tests that you can use to identify which foods are causing the sensitivities. And that is another way in which you can quickly eliminate foods that we know are an intolerance and start to introduce a cleaner diet. Cases that are more severe could require additional herbal supplements or specific medication. There is a new allergy medication in Europe right now that my vet just told me about. It's not been approved in the United States yet, but they're showing really strong signs that it's highly effective. Prescription diets may be advised by your veterinarian. These often contain hydrolyzed protein. What that means is that the proteins are broken down into fragments that are too small to trigger an allergic reaction. They are fairly expensive. So they're fairly expensive, and they require special manufacturing processes. They also must be produced on a dedicated line where they're not being there's no cross-contamination from other foods. Diarrhea or a loose stool is another very common issue that we hear about in terms of illnesses that may need to go to the veterinarian. What we're trying to focus on is how can we positively impact through diet and perhaps bring an animal back to wellness without interventions that may be more severe. So in the event of a loose stool, it can be minor. It could be just that they got into something and it's temporary, or it could be serious. So if diarrhea starts and it lasts more than 48 hours, and it's sudden, or it's chronic, meaning it's lasting more than 3 weeks and varies in intensity, you should probably see your veterinarian. Sometimes the reason is obvious, they got into something, but sometimes it's hard to identify. It could be something your dog ate. It could be an intestinal blockage, which is very serious. It could be due to stress or vigorous exercise. If your dog has parasites or pathogens, that could be a cause of it. IBD, which is inflammatory bowel disease, could be a side effect of a new medication, and it could indicate a bacterial or viral infection. So just so you can identify better, large intestine diarrhea is more frequent. The stool will be semi-formed, and it may have some blood in it. There's also an urgency if this is a problem in the large intestine. Small intestine tends to be less frequent. There's no urgency and no visible blood. The small intestine is where most of your dog's nutrients get absorbed. It means the body can be missing out on a lot of nutrition if this is where the problem is coming from. And more likely it'll be accompanied by vomiting, nutrient deficiencies, and weight loss. I also just want to talk for a minute about inflammation in the GI tract. Inflammatory bowel disease, also known as chronic enteropathy, is an inflammation of the lining of the digestive tract, and it interferes with the ability to process food and absorb nutrients. The exact causes of IBD in any given case are difficult. Several treatments are available. According to the Merck Veterinary Manual, more than 50% of dogs with IBD respond to a diet change alone. That's tremendous. Bacterial imbalances in the gut microbiome associated with IBD can often be corrected, and there's a new treatment called fecal microbiota transplant, which can be done with oral FMT capsules. Doggy Biome produces one that's a gut restore supplement. So we're going to get into our first case study here. Pacific is our foster dog, and the image that you see on the left is him when the first day we brought him home. He came into the shelter at 29.4 pounds with an abdominal impaction. He had a large bone removed. We took him post-surgery probably after 5 days, and after 1 week on a nutrient-rich diet with four feedings per day of puppy food, dehydrated pumpkin, and goat's milk, this is what he looked like. He's even more improved now. We started adding additional supplements after the first week, including a rich multivitamin mix and Animate Endure, which is a product that I use for joint health. It's got 6 ingredients in it, and it's to help support, I use this to help support the weight gain on the joints and tendons, because he's gaining weight in a fairly rapid pace after losing so much muscle mass. He had pressure sore wounds on his hips due to so much weight loss, and we started using silver honey on that. He's still thin, but at his next visit, which was 5 days after we took him, his weight had increased to 39.4 pounds, and that was 2 days before the image on the right was taken. So his body condition presented with a score of 1 to 2. He had severe diarrhea, pressure sores, which I talked about. He also had a small pin wound on his leg. We put him on Solutions Goat Nog for a week. This was to allow the digestive tract to rest, adding dehydrated pumpkin for fiber and as a good prebiotic, with a grain-inclusive puppy food. Now, the reason we went with grain-inclusive puppy food is because he was on IMs at the shelter, and we didn't want to shock the system by trying to put him on something that would be too rich. He was very timid and apprehensive, so we also added Earth Animals Emotional Balance, and we're very fortunate to have a Tellington Touch or T-Touch practitioner in the area. So we started him with T-Touch the first week that we took him. Within 2 to 3 days, his poops were better, and he was being fed 4 times a day. He started gaining weight. He started to become more confident, and after the T-Touch, there was a big improvement in his behavior and timidness. We took him to shelter. He gained 10 pounds. We started adding Vitalize powder and Animate Endure. He's got continued weight gain. His sores are almost healed. His confidence is amazingly improved. And last week, we moved him to adult food with fresh foods and more exercise to rebuild the muscle. He went back for his second T-Touch and started acting like a puppy, dancing. And we have now moved him entirely to a raw diet. He was still having loose stools and issues with his stools, and now they're picture perfect. If poop can be that. So I'm going to get into talking about food now. I can't start this talk on raw dairy without acknowledging the amazing impact that Jacqueline Hill and Roxanne Stone made on the pet food industry when they started Answers Pet Food. We lost Jacqueline last year, but Roxanne has started as a consultant with a new company called Solutions Pet Food. And I am thrilled to be able to work with their foods in our store environment. So raw goat's milk is the universal mother's milk, and it's nature's perfect food. It exists solely for nourishing babies, and it contains every nutrient needed for optimal health. The nutrients in grass-fed raw milk are in their most usable form. As I stated before, it's very bioavailable, so the body does not have to work to absorb and utilize the nutrients. If you have young animals, senior animals, or animals that are really ill, and they can tolerate raw goat's milk, then it is one of the best and quickest ways to help restore the gut microbiome and to help to get them on the path back to good health. Jackie, years ago when they started the company, talked to me about a dog that they had come in with pancreatic cancer. And it was given a very short time to live, so they decided they were going to put it on goat's milk and let it rest, let the animal's digestive tract rest while treating the cancer. It was completely successful, and the dog went on. 5 years later, it was doing great, and all it was being fed was goat's milk. And I will tell you that I visited her before Answers changed hands. I visited her at her plant in Pennsylvania, and she had one of the most gorgeous black shepherds I have ever seen. And I said, well, you've been feeding this dog your raw diets. And she said, no, he only gets goat's milk. That's all he's had since he was a puppy. So if you have an animal that's really ill and you can't, this is a great option in terms of being able to get them to a place where hopefully they will be able to eat other foods, but if not, then you can feed it for a long period of time without ill effects happening. I'm going to talk a little bit about kefir. Kefir is made hopefully with organic grass-fed dairy. It's a very powerful probiotic meal topper. And so this is another way in which you can help promote healthy digestion. It's rich in probiotics, and it's an easy way to add food that is rich in probiotics to whatever you're feeding your animal. I think it's a great addition no matter whether you're feeding a dry diet, a wet diet, etc. I'm going to talk about solutions a little bit more because I actually had a customer call me right before I started this, and I added this slide in. And she was asking about solutions in particular because all of their goat's milk has other additions to it. And it has other effects depending upon which one you use. The goat nog is what we've been giving to Pacific. He has some anxiety, and so this is one of the reasons that I wanted to add that on top of just helping to restore his gut health. Tex sauce is more of your traditional raw goat's milk. It helps with inflammation. It helps with allergies. Digestive upset, so it's a very good go-to just for a general good tonic. The tummy butter tea is more for gut health, leaky gut, food intolerance, IBD. This has some additional herbals that are added to it to help restore and support gut health, and the same with the better butter tea. More geared to heavy metal toxicity, which is in a lot of animals because the pet food industry manufacturers don't typically test for heavy metal toxicity. And some of the items that they put in their foods can have heavy metals. So just like you might take chlorella to help clear some of that out, this is one of the remedies that's very good as well. It's also good for pancreatitis, liver disease, kidney disease, some of those more internal organ clarifying or detoxifying issues. They also do what are called jiggles, and it's collagen. And collagen, I'm going to touch on briefly. Collagen is it's the glue essentially for all of your connective tissue. So Answers used to make a fish stock that was a fermented product that was absolutely phenomenal. When the company changed, they no longer had access to that. So I'm very happy that Solutions has come up with their different jiggles formulas, which are very similar. They're gelatins and they're very rich in all sorts of good stuff for connective health on top of your gut and immune system. Now, I will tell you, for those of you who don't know our store or have never been there, we have always been very big raw diet proponents. Our original store was a small store that was in our first slide. 7 years ago, we moved across the street into a larger facility, and we have approximately 20 glass front freezers in the front of our store, and an 8x10 back freezer, and another double back freezer in the back stock area to house the different frozen foods that we offer and sell. This is one of the ways that we help promote people to have their animals be healthier, because clean foods help the microbiome. This is very dear to me, so bear with me for a moment. We know that whether you're buying a commercial raw food diet or you're making your food at home, you can really strengthen the health of your dogs and cats. Now, I'm going to do this as a caveat. There is not, I beg you to find a veterinarian who would not say that they have seen an animal that was almost killed by people making their own homemade diets, whether they're conventional, integrative, or holistic. And I'm saying this because it's extremely important, if you are making your animals' diets at home, that you either work with a nutritionist, a veterinary nutritionist, to make sure that that diet is balanced. I have had over the years people come into our store and say to me that they're feeding a raw diet. When I ask them what they're feeding, they're like, well, we order chicken backs from Murray's, and that's what we feed the dogs. And their dogs didn't have a proper balance of calcium and phosphorus and got very ill, had other metabolic conditions. So I implore you, if you are feeding a homemade diet, to make sure that it's balanced. I also will say that in some of the research that has been done recently, I just read an article by Dr. Richard Patton, who is an animal nutritionist who formulates a lot of diets, and they were looking at the difference between a traditional ancestral wolf diet and diets of dogs now. And just a little bit of brief history. Wolves morphed into dogs, or we got our modern dogs because of them growing up alongside us through the agricultural ages, etc. So the composition of what they ate changed, and their microbiome changed because of that. So right now, the calculation for what an animal should have is calories should come from fat and protein first. And a lot of the fresh food pet makers, whether it's raw, frozen, or it's lightly cooked, are using a diet guideline that's roughly 50% protein and 50% fat. In comparison, a Wolf's diet ancestrally would have been 55-45. So with maybe 1% in fruits and vegetables, grains. Low carbs in your dog's diet, it'll optimize their metabolism, and it's going to lead to a much longer and healthier life. According to Dr. Patton, 10% carbs, less than 10% carbs is optimal. Think about the fact that they really don't need carbs. And so if you want to figure out how much carbs you are giving your dog, we will talk about that for a minute. Let me just go forward. Let me go back. Sorry, let me go back to here. So I'm going to give you a really quick carb calculation if you're feeding a dry food diet. When you flip over that bag and you look at the guaranteed analysis, you're going to take the number 100 and you're going to add the protein, the fat, the fiber, the moisture, and the ash, which you can estimate at 6% if it's not listed, and for most bags it won't. Once you deduct those 6 things from 100, you will get the amount of starch or carbs that are in the food. So I think I've got it down here where I'm going to show you Purina, but we'll move on and then we can come back to that. So I just want to talk a little bit about rotating raw foods. Really, really, really important. If you are going to feed a raw food diet or a homemade diet, that you rotate your proteins if you can. If there's not some sort of food intolerance or allergy issue, that you're rotating the different foods, because you're going to get different benefits from each one of those components. Increased vitality, bright shiny coat, good teeth, good oral health. It's really important if you can to feed nice raw bones. You can also feed duck necks, turkey necks. Before I came up here, Pacific, our case study, had a nice duck neck to help clean his teeth, which aren't great right now. Brighter eyes. What we've found over the years is that dogs that are overweight will lose weight and dogs that are underweight will gain weight because the diet is clean, so they get back to what their optimal weight is going to be. Allergy control, production of histamines. Get, again, overall stronger immune system because you're feeding the microbiome, and a smaller stool and less stinky stool. One of the things that I always hear when we move people to a raw diet is the stool is so much less. That's the first thing. And the second is he's not drinking as much water. And the dogs don't drink as much water because they're getting so much moisture on an intracellular level from the raw food. So our feeling is that it's not just a diet, it's a good preventative medicine that will help your dog throughout its life. And quite honestly, I hear time and time again, it must be pretty expensive. The truth is, if you're feeding a really high quality kibble, especially in the last year, you can actually feed raw without it being that much more expensive. And if you're feeding your pet a food that meets their natural requirements, vet bills go down. So this balances itself out. Now, I know that there are a lot of people that are on budgets, and so we're also, during this talk, going to give you an idea of how to if you can't afford fully a raw food diet, how you can really increase the vitality of your animal through percentages of giving them whole nutritive foods. So again, I had a call right before I came in to this lecture from a woman who we were talking about raw diets, and she has a 14-year-old dog. And I happened to mention that gently cooked is one of the things that is just blowing up right now. And quite honestly, I'm really happy about it. The reason is that over the years, raw diets are not always the best for a particular family. You know, people may want to put their animals on a raw diet, but they've got young kids, they're worried about pathogens, they've got people that are immune compromised. The dogs get older and they don't tolerate it as well. It's not as easy on their system. So the gently cooked category is, I think, one that is really, really very welcome in terms of what we are starting to recommend. For the most part, these are diets that are cooked at a super low temperature, or they're cooked in the sous vide method. It still is going to offer optimal nutrition. It provides whole foods with minimal processing. There's a lot of transparency in the companies that are producing these foods now. If you take a look at a Pup Above as an example, they are cooking in the sous vide style in bone broth. So it's a really beautiful, rich combination of ingredients. But we have many others in the store now that like My Perfect Pet, there's a lot of them that can offer great advantages. Open Farm is another one. Dr. Karen Becker, who I admire greatly, she's helped to formulate Raised Right, which has got very simple ingredients. And so I think this is a great option. All of the gently food cooks that we carry are made with human grade ingredients. A lot of them have really a big portion of their focus on sustainability as well. Freeze dried. So we talked about raw, but what happens when raw is not easy or you're traveling? This is a great option. Now, I've been to a number of the plants that produce freeze-dried foods, and it's really a process where you take the raw food and you flash freeze it, and it locks that raw nutrition into a shelf-stable form. These are huge containers in which they're just these huge round containers that they slide all of the raw food in. They put it in and lock it down and start flash freezing it. And when it comes out, it can come out in patties and nuggets, etc. But all you have to do is add water or goat's milk to rehydrate it. I always like to go to raw first because of the moisture intracellularly, but this is such a great option if raw is not what is available or it's hard to get. And there are people who live in parts of the country where it's just really impossible to get some of these. So sending them a freeze-dried diet, which they can rehydrate, is a great way for them to have a raw diet available. It's good for when you're on the go. It doesn't need to be kept frozen. It can be used as a whole food training treat. We have a lot of people that use it as toppers. And it can also help if you're feeding as a treat and transitioning to raw to help improve the palatability. Raw frozen foods often don't smell as strongly as some of the other foods like canned foods. So sometimes it does take a while to get this transition to happen. Air dried. So we have a lot of air dried foods that are available now. It used to be that it was ZB Peak and Real Meat. Those were the primary ones in the arena that did air drying. Air drying is basically moisture is removed via evaporation. It's similar to dehydration without the heat. Now, I've run into a little bit of controversy on this, and I think that some of the more commercial ones are now using a low heat process to help dry the food more quickly. But this is going to require more research than I had time for before I presented this information. Air drying minimizes damage to proteins, vitamins, and nutrients, and it contains the natural ingredients. So your animal is getting almost all of the benefits of this. The picture you see here is Dr. Bob Goldstein's company, Earth Animal Wisdom. It's their new product. It took them years to produce. This can be used as a full meal or topper, and it can add, it's a great way to add a topper that's shelf stable onto your dog's diet. I've always talked about this as a process that's a modern twist to a centuries-old technique of preserving meats. The slow, gentle process eliminates pathogenic bacteria, and it protects the nutrients and the ingredients. I think there's a lot of new foods out on the market that are using this type of process now. We recently got in products from New Zealand, the New Zealand Food Company. Sundays is another one. So I think that this is a great way to add a really rich, good smelling raw topper and get whole food nutrition in. Dehydrated foods, on the other hand, is just what it sounds like. You're pulling the moisture out of the food. It is a very old method of preserving food, and it makes the food very light and small. Dehydrated dog and cat food is processed at very low heat for a very long time to draw the moisture out. Because of the small amount of heat used, it's not considered completely raw, but it's not also considered being cooked. There's a number of dehydrated diets available that are very good. Sojo's, The Honest Kitchen, Dr. Harvey's are excellent options. I have talked about using these to help stretch raw diets if there's budget considerations. They can also be rehydrated and used as toppers. And one of my favorite ways to use them is to rehydrate them and stuff them into marrow bones that have had the marrow taken out, been eaten out of them, and then refreeze them. Because it's a wonderful way to add whole foods in through giving your dog a treat when you need to be quiet. Almost all of them use human-grade fresh ingredients, and great way to add fruits, vegetables. Some of them do contain meats, but the meats are high quality as well. I am going to just talk briefly about bone broth. I love bone broth. Bone broth is, if you're big on your own nutrition, you know it's really good for you, and it's really, really good for your animals as well. It's rich in glycosaminoglycans, I'm going to try and say this, GAGs, glycosaminoglycans. They're essential molecules in the body. What they do is they help support collagen, elastin, and cells themselves. They're very important for connective tissue, for tendons and cartilage. Some of the most important GAGs are chondroitin sulfate, dermatan sulfate, keratin sulfate, and hyaluronate. Now, some of these last things may sound familiar because when you're treating dogs for joint issues, these are some of the things that are important to help maintain good joint and connective tissue health. Bone marrow is soft. It's a gelatinous tissue. It's in the middle of long bones. It's a very important source of stem cells that produce fat, cartilage, bone, and blood cells. It's rich in nutrients, and if it's cooked appropriately, bone broth can cook down the collagen proteins into a gelatin, which provides amino acids the body uses to make connective tissue. Going back to a previous slide when we were looking at the solutions jiggles, this is how they produce their jiggles into a gelatin form, which is very important, very good for the gut lining, for connective tissue, for joints, brain, etc. Bone broth also contains a lot of gelatin, and it should have a jelly-like consistency. It is a great barrier for pathogens and toxins. It also helps protect arteries and organs while keeping them subtle. Just like us, as pet age, collagen production decreases. So I am a firm believer that adding bone broth, especially to animals that are getting older, although you can start giving it at any time in adulthood, is very, very good for them. So I'm going to give you a few fun facts now. I talk a lot in some of my other lectures about food, but dry food. And I do some talking about how dry food came to be in our society during the 20th century and the late 19th century. But one of the things that we always hear is it AAFCO certified and all of that. So let me tell you what AAFCO is first. AAFCO is the Association of Animal Feed Control Officials. And there is an AAFCO council or committee for each state in the United States. They follow part of their function is to make sure that the minimum nutrient requirements are being met by various pet foods that are offered state by state or city-state, in our case in Washington, D.C. So the first published data for minimum nutrient requirements came from the NRC in 1974, and it was called the Nutrient Requirements for Dogs and Cats. According to Dr. Becker, the small groups of research using puppies and kittens were not what we would utilize today. And according to her, they wouldn't pass any university ethics committee in this day and age. This has remained the definitive guide used by AAFCO for pet food manufacturers, and it's not been updated since 2006. Today, every veterinary school has partnerships with one of the 5 top pet food brands. They're all run by parent human food companies, and you're going to recognize these. Some of the examples include Science Diet, who's made by Colgate-Palmolive, Purina, who's owned by Nestle, Blue Buffalo, who was bought out by General Mills several years ago, Milk-Bone and Pepperoni, made by J.M. Smuckers, and Iams, Eukanuba, Rogue Hanen, Therapeutic are all Mars Pet Care. Finally, prescription pet food diets do not contain any medication or special substances. They're called prescription diets because you can only get them from a veterinarian. Some have hydrolyzed proteins, but the ingredient decks, if you read them, can be pretty dreadful. And in my opinion, 9 times out of 10, whole fresh foods can deliver much better results. So there are now several brands that are available that are considered over-the-counter prescription diets with hydrolyzed proteins. This includes Sports of 10 and Square Pet. Also, Farmina makes a very good veterinary diet, but that is only available by prescription. These can be considered functional foods and utilized for specific conditions. But again, in my opinion, the cornerstone of any treatment is always going to hinge on fresh whole foods, whether you're in for 20% or 100%. We're also now seeing, and this started a number of years ago, more veterinarians that are interested in nutrition, but it is not a cornerstone of their curriculum in most veterinary schools. Back in the early days when we started our store, we saw Bravo Pet Food, Stella and Chewy's, and there was another one that were going into veterinary schools as guest speakers to talk about the benefits of whole food diets. I think a lot of the younger vets are seeing the benefits of whole foods and are starting to pay a lot more attention to that as part of what they can speak to their patients about. And it's a welcome change. One of the final things that I'm going to talk about in dry foods is that about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, the FDA came out with a letter that went out to veterinarians across the country that basically talked about the fact that they were seeing an increase in DCM, which is dilated cardiomyopathy in dogs, from boutique manufacturers, exotic proteins, and grain-free diets, especially those using peas. And this literally caused a complete turnaround in our industry. When we first started, grain-free diets were more what you would go to for allergy conditions, but they blew up over a decade and became really the most sought after dry foods in the store. But when this particular letter came out, all of a sudden everybody, veterinarians, and to this day still are telling them that they have to have grain-inclusive foods. So we have increased our availability of grain-inclusive foods dramatically in response to the marketplace. So I added this because I really wanted to talk about the fact that in the Journal of Animal Science in 2020, there's now like over 150 reviews that have been done by various members of the scientific community and veterinary community, and that there's no merit to the evidence that it causes DCM. So diet-associated DCM is tied to the following: diets that are low in protein, taurine, and are taurine precursors like methionine, diets that are specifically high in insoluble fiber, if there's a nutrient deficiency or an excess or lack of potassium, choline, methionine, thiamine, copper, heavy metals can contribute to DCM, and finally hypothyroidism. They have found that there's no definitive correlation for grain-free diets or the ingredients to DCM. some veterinary cardiologists have, and researchers have, as I said, asked to have their animals switch to a grain-inclusive diet, but there's not sufficient evidence based on that to require this extreme switch. When people come in and they say their veterinarian has recommended this, depending upon who they are, I'll either tell them what I think or we'll switch them to a grain-inclusive diet. Grain-inclusive diets are fine. They were in the marketplace for years. And so there's not a problem in feeding them. But I do want to just point out that this has been now disproven. And actually, when this letter first came out, I went back and did research on if there was another point in history in which this happened, and it was University of Data's 2003. The same issue was raised, but it was raised for diets that had poor ingredient panels. And so this is something that we will probably see recycle itself again in another couple of decades, if not sooner. So, having said that, I just want to say that grain-free and whole grain kibble does not mean carbohydrate-free. So carbohydrates can come from a grain source like potatoes. It can be conventional grains, tapioca, or non-cereal grains. The grade, the quality, the amount, and the kind of grain is key. Whole intact grains have all the fiber, so it's not a fast sugar burn, not like refined carbohydrates. I will tell you that I have seen in dog food packages things like rice bran, which is basically the sweeps off of the rice flour once they process it. So that's not a whole grain. It's not going to have a nutritive benefit, but it's used as a filler in some less, more supermarket or store-bought brands of dog food. So we're going to go back to the carbs again. And here is your formula. 100, start with 100. What's the percentage of protein? What's the percentage of fat, moisture, and ash? And that'll give you your net carbs. Here's your example. So I started out with, this is taken directly from Purina Pro Plan's website. This in the very top of this, talking about it's a specialized food, high quality meat, salmon, chicken. And this is for the sport plan. First ingredient is chicken. The second is corn gluten meal. The third is brewer's yeast. Then you've got animal fat, poultry byproduct meal, and I do not want to get into telling you what that is. Whole grain corn, corn germ meal, and fish meal. Now, I used this, and I don't want to tell you what Animal Digest is. I used this as an example because Purina Pro Plan is one of the most recommended dry foods that I hear in our store from people who've been to their vet. I also we feed a lot of the working dogs in the area. By working, I mean police and military. And some of the police dogs, the veterinarians that monitor them recommend Purina Pro Plan. I can tell you that almost any bag in my store that I turn over will have a better ingredient panel than this and not be as expensive. This is over $100 a bag for this 50-pound bag of dog food. But here is your carb level. Started at 100, straight from the guaranteed analysis, 30% protein, 20% fat, so that's 50. 12% moisture, that's 62. We're going to presume the ash is 6, so that's 68. Take that from 100, and you've got 32% carbs. And we're trying to stay under 10, if possible, down to none. So this leads me to my next study. This is Brian. Brian is one of our customers. And basically, I got a phone call one day from a woman who said she'd been working with her vet and she had heard of us, and what her vet told her to do wasn't working. Basically, the vet recommended putting him on a salmon kibble. He had been throwing up. She said he came from a puppy mill. He had been throwing up pretty consistently since they had gotten him. He had consistently had gut issues. He was very apprehensive and timid, a lot of anxiety, expressed anxiety. And so she got the salmon recommendation. Just to let you know, when I'm talking about dry food, it is an ultra processed. It's heated to a pretty high level. And she put him on the food because she suspected he had a food intolerance or an allergy. Well, what this did was it completely overwhelmed and overtaxed his already upset GI tract. And because he was in a constant state of not feeling well, this raised his anxiety and stress as well. So his guardian really did several things absolutely right. If she hadn't been so observant, he could have gone through a lifetime of trial and error, medications, worsening behavior. But she observed him, she questioned what she was told, and then she sought out a different approach. Once we started working with her, she continued to observe, she reported the results, and most importantly, we both listened to him. So he's still in process, but we're just going to start with what we were presented with. A dog that consistently threw up his food. So again, I put him on Solutions Goat Nog for a week. I wanted to allow his digestive tract to rest. And we added sweet potato in for fiber and as a prebiotic. His demeanor was very timid and apprehensive. So same thing I did with Pacific. I added earth animal emotional balance, and I recommended T-Touch to her. After a week and a half, he started having very good poops, no throwing up. And so she decided at that point to try and give him his old kibble, and he immediately started having very bad diarrhea. I spoke to her again, and we put him back on the goat's milk. He was still hungry, so I added in Under the Weather's new kibble with a hydrolyzed protein. And he didn't care for it, but his poop was very spot on and no throwing up. So we were trying to figure out a new food for his diet, and I suggested lightly cooked food made by My Perfect Pet that was minimally processed. Thursday, the 8th, right before, while I was working on this presentation, I got an update from her. Brian is like, I'm not eating kibble because it doesn't make me feel good. And she said that he's refusing it, and even with goat's milk, some of his symptoms return. He absolutely loves the lightly cooked food. His vomiting has stopped, as well as the diarrhea. And we're going to continue with the goat's milk and lightly cooked. I also recommended adding some lightly steamed veggies, including broccoli, Brussels sprouts, carrots, etc., which, come to find out, she had already started doing by mixing it in a blender and smearing it on his licking mat. His behavior is still off, although it's improving. So she is going to go ahead and make an appointment for T-Touch to start working on the behavioral issues. Timidity and fear aggression are two things that really work well when you have a T-Touch practitioner available, or if you can remotely learn about T-Touch. And all of that became worse when he got sick. We're going to be continuing to monitor him, but I think he's going to make great improvement, and with time, his behavior should improve as well. So all of this leads us to, how do we start? So if you're feeding kibble, that's fine, but you can really make an impact by just starting with reducing that by 20% and adding whole foods. One of the easiest ways is to do goat's milk. If that's not available to you, you can add whole sardines, raw or lightly cooked eggs, and organ meats as toppers to the food. There's a wide range of fruit and vegetable superfoods that can be part of your ongoing go-tos, or you can add as toppers. Think about if you have carrots, or you're using some chicken hearts as treats instead of biscuits. There's a lot of ways in which you can add good whole foods in. If you're preparing food for your family, you can take the ends of broccoli, asparagus, bell pepper, carrots, or fresh fruits and lightly steam them, then give them to your pup. That will help also if you're interested in gradually moving to a raw diet to introduce their gut without it being shocking. And another way is to use some of the dehydrated foods that you can add as a topper. And it usually just takes a few minutes to start this and add in what you need. There's also ways in which you can buy some things that are already produced, that are already available. One of my favorites is when we got started with green juju. Green juju started because a woman had a dog, her lab, who had cancer, and she started researching whole foods to help him during this time of treatment. And she came up with a mix of fruits and vegetables in bone broth that she started adding as a topper. And it really so dramatically improved her dog's life and lifespan that she created a company out of it. So that was one start of a revolution that now we have a lot of foods that are readily available. You can use green juju, you can put bone broth in, you can add meat toppers that are whole organ meats that can either be dehydrated or raw. Nuggets makes a rich fish broth, which helps heal the lining of the gut, and that's great for helping to create a more balanced microbiome. And the other thing is, if you have toppers and you've got a dog that's really picky, it's a great way to get them started so they'll start to eat their food. Herbal and homeopathic supplements can be very powerful as you're going through this journey. There are times when I think that they're great additions. This isn't a talk about them, but I just wanted to touch on them so that you can kind of have some leeway, and we're always available to help you if you're trying to figure out what you would like to use. If your dog is on antibiotics, I strongly, strongly recommend adding a pre and probiotic to help maintain the good bacteria in the gut, because antibiotics are one of the known medications that will really interrupt a good animal microbiome. If you've got digestive upsets, you can offer herbal support and probiotics. And I would say you can also add pumpkin. And it's sold in myriad forms if you're in a part of the country where you don't have a pet store that can readily get it for you. You can go and buy canned pumpkin from the supermarket. There's also dehydrated pumpkin available now, or fresh pumpkin. Any of those will help. Anxiety and stress, there's just a variety of homeopathic and herbal products that can be really powerful in helping with situational stress, whether it's traveling, whether it is thunderstorms, change in home, change in moods. So I think that there's a lot of remedies available that can be very important. Pain and joint care. I after attending a really good seminar from one of the lead doctors in stem cell therapy for working dogs, I have come to believe that you should start your animals early with joint support, especially if they're very active, and it'll help them age into adulthood. And it should be absolutely used regularly with senior animals, and this includes cats. A lot of people, because cats are so agile and they jump around, don't think about adding joint supplementation. But cats are extremely stoic, and they will not show you that they have arthritis until it is really bad and they can't go up and down the stairs, etc. So I think there's some great supplements out there that you can utilize that will help restore them. The Animate Endure that we're giving Pacific, I will tell you that I've gotten dogs off of Rimadyl by using that supplement. It's made by animal nutritionist Rob Downey, and it is one of the best herbal supplements that I've ever used for our dogs over the years. CBDs and other adaptogens have just exploded in the marketplace in the last few years. And all mammals have cannabinoid pathways. So CBDs and adaptogens can be very, very effective to help target specific issues, and also can be highly effective with seizures. I actually have had a lot of dogs that are seizure dogs, and I've utilized both CBDs and homeopathics to help treat them, besides having anti-seizure medicine. I had a dog that had very severe seizures, and we actually got her off of all seizure medicine using homeopathics. It took a while, but it was highly effective for her. The final thing I want to say on this is mushrooms. Mushrooms are incredibly powerful for a lot of different issues, and they can help improve immunity, fight cancer, assist with blood sugar levels if you've got dogs that have diabetes, and are good for chronic inflammation, depending upon which mushroom it is. You can also make teas with mushrooms, and the teas can be used to help hydrate the food as well. So it's a good and easy way to get mushrooms into your animal system. So I just want to say I thank everyone, before we start in with any questions, for taking time in your schedule in the afternoon to come and listen to me talk. And good nutrition is just, I can't express how essential it is. That's me. This is my beautiful, lovely Atticus, who passed 2 years ago. He died too young. He died of Cushing's. And I have a feeling I know what helped tip the scale with him, and we just couldn't get him back. I will tell you that my dog that passed recently was 16 years old, a pit bull, and she was great up until the last couple of days of her life. And I think a lot of it was that we just fed her a great diet throughout her life, and she had good genes. So good nutrition is essential. We believe feeding a good diet will help prolong their life. And I'm happy to take questions now. Thank you so much.
Okay, Penny. Well, you're kind of ending on a sad, bittersweet note, but here are some questions. What about cottage cheese?
Cottage cheese is great. My grandmother used to say if you feed dogs cottage cheese, it helps their ears stand up. So we tried that with a couple of our dogs. It didn't work. But I think cottage cheese is a really nice addition, and it's an easy addition. If you can get unpasteurized, that's great. Again, just because pasteurization cooks out some of the good bacteria. So, but not everybody has the advantage of being able to get unpasteurized milk products. It's illegal in some areas. But I think cottage cheese is a nice addition. I think kefir is also great just because it's got that fermentation added to it.
Okay, where can you find veterinary nutritionists?
Hold on. There is a association. Let me see if I can remember what it is.
Maybe we can Google Association of Veterinary Nutritionists.
Yeah, there's an association of veterinary. I can't recall the name right off the top of my head, and I apologize for that. But you can go through the association and locate someone that can work with you if you're planning on doing a homemade diet, and just make sure that you're doing all the additives that you need to do. I do also want to mention that Animate makes a, let's see here. Animate makes a product called Enhance. Let me see if I can find it here.
Spell you're saying who makes it?
Animate. Here we go. Let me post that right into the chat here. And this product was built to help people with if they're feeding a raw diet, to make sure that they have all the micronutrients that they need.
Say it out loud too for people who are just going to watch the video.
Yeah, it's Animate Enhance. It's ANNAMAET Enhance. And it's a vitamin and mineral supplement. And it's specifically geared for home prepared diets. It was formulated by 2 board certified veterinary nutritionists. And I've known Rob Downey for years, and he is like, I so enjoy every time I get to sit down and speak with him on nutrition. He's just a wealth of information.
Someone asked in chat whether you have any supplement recommendations. So I guess that's one.
Yes, we have a lot of supplements listed on our website. I actually have a 25 by 8 foot apothecary in our store. So I am a big proponent of using supplements as needed. And I'm happy to have anyone contact me if they have specific questions, and I'll do my best to help them. My email address is, do that. My email address is PENNYE, J as in John, N as in Nancy, at BBWOOFINC.com.
Okay, repeat that one more time because it kind of went in and out. Or I've got this part of it. PENNYEJN at
BBW
BBW. Okay.
OOFINC.com.
Okay. Someone wrote that they heard that the bones in turkey necks are too large. Is that a problem? And did you mention chicken necks?
I didn't mention chicken necks, but I should have. Chicken necks are absolutely appropriate, especially for smaller dogs and cats.
Okay. And the turkey bones are okay for larger dogs, I guess.
Yeah, because when they're in the raw, don't cook them. When they're raw, they're very small and they're easily passed through the digestive tract and digested.
Okay, someone asked, what is T-touch? I answered that in chat, but we'll see how you'd explain it.
Oh, great. Zoe Carter just put in for the Raw Feeding Veterinary Society should be able to point to nutritionist.
Aha.
So Zoe, thank you very much for that. T-touch is, I always have a hard time explaining it, but it is a modality that was created by Ms. Tellington Jones, and it has to do with a series of ways of touching an animal and movements which help to stimulate the central nervous system. And I am always amazed when I watch practitioners who are very skilled at the results that we see come across. And again, you know, I can't emphasize this enough. It's for them, they have honed the observation to such a degree that they're able to sense where there's tightness, where there's fear, etc. But we as pet guardians also can do a tremendous amount by observing and really listening to our animals. And the more that you can develop that, just like they have developed it, the better you're going to be able to help them as well.
I put in chat that we have a webinar that Pam Wanveer did that
Yes.
they could watch the video of. If you're listening on tape, just go to our YouTube channel and you'll find it in the health section. Okay, and we occasionally run a class and you can get on the, not wait list, the notification list so that you will be notified when the next one will be held. Okay. Do you recommend fish oil or other omega-3 for joint comfort? And if so, which brands?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, recent veterinary and scientific research is showing that fish oil is one of the best ways in which you can help to treat joint issues and support the cardiovascular system. There is a formula that veterinarians use that I think if you've ever read the book or seen the book, and if you haven't, pick it up. It's a great resource. The Forever Dog by Rodney Habib and Dr. Karen Becker. she has the formula in there, and it's based upon how much weight the animal is to how much oil. And it's actually much more than you think. I've always used fish oils for supplementation. I really like rotating the types of oils. I think that that's important. So we have ultra oil that we sell, which is one of my favorites because it's all cold water fish. It's sardine and herring oil with vitamin E. And salmon oil, probably one of my favorites is Brilliant. They have a lot of transparency in their product. And so that's for strictly salmon oil that's wild caught. And then, let me see here, Nordic Naturals, which does cod liver oil. So I always tell people if they're going to be using oils all the time, to rotate their oils. That way your animal won't develop a sensitivity to one type versus another. And they all have different benefits and different levels of omegas in them. So you're getting a good variety.
This brings up a question about your services. Can someone order something like that online from the Big Bad Wolf and have it sent to them in another state?
Of course. Absolutely. We ship a lot of items all across the country.
Okay, good. Are frozen broccoli florets good if your dog will only eat them frozen and not if they're thawed or cooked?
Yes. Yes. They're fine. And I have to tell you something very funny, just as a sideline to this. Got a picture of my beautiful Atticus, my husky, who I could not get. He was raised on goat's milk and freeze-dried, and then I couldn't get him to eat raw food. So we ended up having to put him on kibble because I just couldn't get him to eat other things. So I was packing frozen food to ship out to one of our customers one day, and I had to unpack it out of its original packing and pack it so it would fit in the cooler that I was sending it in. And one of the patties slid out of the bag that I was working with onto the floor, and he happened to be at work with me, which he was almost every day of his life. And he grabbed the patty and ran in a corner and gobbled it. And I was like, I had been trying to feed him raw food for years. And I looked at him, and it was like a light bulb went off in my head. I went, oh, you just want it frozen. Because I had been thawing all the food out. So if you've got one of the dogs that only likes cold food, then by all means, feed them cold food. It's perfectly fine.
Elizabeth Berry mentioned that Friendship Animal Hospital in DC has a nutritionist. So that's good to know for local people. How can I get my senior dog to lose more weight as he gets older and less mobile?
The best way, I feel, is to cut back on kibble. Exercise is important, not running, but good walks is important. And adding, cutting back on the kibble and adding whole foods. We have had a lot of success with, as a matter of fact, I was just talking to a customer yesterday about this. She came in with a 7-year-old Cocker Spaniel that, I kid you not, must have been 50 or 60 pounds. Extremely obese. And obesity is the biggest health issue in the United States for animals these days. So I advised her to cut back on the dry food by 25% to start, and start feeding fruits and veggies in place of it. This is one of the best ways that we've gotten to have animals trimmed down. If you can afford to do a raw diet or a lightly cooked diet in place of kibble, that's going to be one of the fastest and most effective ways. I will say that you can use weight loss formulas. Be sure if you're buying a kibble that it's going to be a weight management, that you check in with whoever's selling it to you. Some of them just have a higher amount of fiber in them, which is a way to try and get the animals to trim down, but it doesn't cut down on the carbohydrates. Some of them are super high fiber, which means that your animal will lose weight really quickly. But you can't keep them on that, or they will lose too much weight because it's just too much of a fiber diet there. So I'm always going to go back to opting to do good, wholesome, raw food or lightly cooked food, as much whole food as you can. Cut back on the kibble, which is going to be high on carbohydrates. And I think that that's where you're going to get the best health gains and the biggest loss in terms of a healthy weight loss. Just like with us, you know, if you're eating fast food once a day, right? You have to stop for lunch, that's all that's available, and you're gaining weight and you decide that you're going to start exercising more and you're going to cut out fast food and have salad instead. I'm not indicating you feed salad to your dog, but if you stick to that, you will start to lose weight because you're cutting carbs out. So, you know, it's what they're finding in now that the Dog Genome Project is going on is that there's a lot of similarities to the way that we take care of our nutrition and the way that we take care of our dog's nutrition. Now, obviously, dogs are obligate carnivores. They're not obligate carnivores. They're herbivore carnivores like we are. But as much as you can improve their microbiome, give them foods that are going to support that healthy body, they'll naturally lose weight. And as I said earlier when I was talking about raw foods, we have put animals on raw foods where they lost weight when they went on to a totally raw diet, and animals that have gained weight when they went on a completely raw diet. So hopefully you'll be able to incorporate some of that into the changes that you want to make with your dog that's getting older.
Christy wants to know if you have any other joint supplement recommendations for senior dogs.
I've got a lot of them in the store. Christy, I know
Is that what you said was on your website?
I've got a lot of them that are on the website. Christy, I know, is local. And if you just want to stop in one day when I'm there, I can go through some of the options with you. But we do have a lot of very good joint supplements available. One of the ones that, if you're not in the area, that's common, a lot of people are on Dosequin. I like the Endure much more than that. But if you want to do like a soft chew, Better Science makes a very good soft chew that is high in a number of the criteria that we need to help support joint health.
Okay, Nicole wrote in that she thinks the American College of Veterinary Nutrition would be the place to search for a board-certified veterinary nutritionist.
Yeah,
And,
I think you could use both
okay.
of them as well.
And also, someone wrote in that Nordic Naturals is sardine and anchovy. Okay.
They do several different mixes, but one of the primary ones they do is cod liver. That's what they're known for.
Where does good canned food fit into this picture? And
Yeah.
is the formula for 0% carb, not zero, is the formula for percent of carbs the same for canned food as for kibble?
Oh, that's a great question. It is. I think it's very, let's see. I was just looking at this. I think it's exactly the same. There may be a slight differentiation, but I know that I was calculating out one of our raw food diets for carbs, and it came out exactly to 0. So I think if you use that formula with canned food, it's going to probably be a very low percentage. I was looking as an example, and I'm sorry, I meant to include it in this talk. But in answer to your question, canned food can be very, very useful. Now, you will have carbs in canned food if you're using like a chicken and rice formula or something that is grain inclusive. Canned food is great to be used as toppers, but again, it depends on which manufacturer it is. Some canned foods cook their foods more than others, and I can draw a comparison with like Fermina canned food for dogs and cats, and a new one that we just introduced called Rockstar from the UK. Fermina's from Italy. The way that they do their canning process is they put raw food into the can, they seal it, and then they cook it at a really, really low temperature. So it is a lightly cooked food. I'm not going to call it minimally processed, but it is certainly not ultra processed as much as some of the dry foods that we see in the marketplace are. So if you want to use canned food as a topper, I think that that's great. It's adding moisture to the diet. But again, if you can get more of those whole foods, there's going to be a great benefit. Even if it's just 20% of the diet, it can go a long way to helping improve your animal's health.
Elizabeth wrote that she cut down on starchy dog treats and substituted whole food treats like bully sticks, crispy fish skins, and others. What are some of the super healthy treats you recommend?
So first and foremost, Elizabeth, kudos to you. That's great. So I actually love organ meats as super healthy treats. Putting organ meats into a diet is just really, really good and important. So those are some of my favorites. I also really like any treats that are freeze-dried. If you're using them for training treats, those are really, really good because they're easy, they're dry in your pocket, but also it's a great way to get raw food into your dog's diet. And you can also use, like, small batches just come out with freeze-dried, but it's got superfoods in it. So it's going to have, things like blueberries, raspberries, spinach in small amounts. But again, any kind of treat that you can get that's more of a whole food treat that's going to add superfoods in, you're going to get a big bang for your buck, even if it's in small amounts. And
Although this presentation focused on dogs, Christy wants to know whether the same information would apply to cats.
yeah, because you're basing the carbs on, you're basically basing your carbs on a formula for the food. So yes.
I believe that is our last question. And I want to thank you very much for doing this. If you want to stop and read the chat, well, here's another question. This always happens. She's using canned food as about 16% of the diet. The rest is freeze dried, and brands like Woof, Max Treat, Kiwi, Bravo, Dr. Marty, etc. Training treats include home-cooked meat. Supplements are ProBalance, Icelandic, and Advanced Dasaquin. So does that sound okay? Is there
That
anything
sounds
you
like a great mix. You know, I'm glad to see that you're even though you're using freeze dried, you're using some good quality freeze dried formulas. The one thing I would, and I'm going to go back to it again and again, the one thing that I would add in is if you're using water or not dehydrating it, add some raw goat's milk or kefir to it. And I think that would be the one thing that I would say would be a good addition.
All right, and someone else just said that she uses dehydrated liver treats, and they're probably fine.
You know,
okay. Go ahead.
I would say dehydrated liver is fine, but liver, depending upon what the source was to begin with, can have, you know, some toxicity in it. So I would rotate between that and heart, spleen, kidney. That way you're not doing exclusively just the liver.
And you can get all of those freeze-dried I know you can get freeze-dried liver pretty much anywhere.
Yeah.
Are the others as common?
Well, we have a lot of different types of organ meats at the store. So they're not as common, but they definitely are available.
Okay.
Heart is probably going to be the easiest one next to liver to get. And there's a whole school of thought with Eastern food as medicine, that feeding, if you've got a problem with a specific organ in the body and you feed that organ, that it'll help support the treatment for that.
All right. My dog was recently diagnosed with colitis, and I was told to feed a bland diet and probiotics. They gave me the Royal Canin prescription diet canned food for 5 days. Is that junk? What's the best option?
So I'm not a big fan of Science Diet or Royal Canin. I know that they're used a lot, but I think that you can get to a bland diet with better ingredient panels with some of the other foods. I would tell you, if you were going to follow that advice, to get Dave's restricted diets. They do a bland diet that is chicken and rice or lamb and rice. Definitely prebiotics and probiotics. If you're where you can get goat's milk, that would be great. And pumpkin, that's going to go a much further, much longer way to improving the gut health. in a shorter period of time.
Someone else is using Royal Canin RX gastrointestinal high fiber. Her dog is still itching a lot despite giving him probiotics, Purina, oh my, Fortiflora, and Calming Care. He's now on Apoquel.
Yeah, this
So
is
for itching.
Yeah, Karen, this is really common with, you know, going back to just everything I've talked about. You know, you can throw an ultra processed food at the problem, and Royal Canin is ultra processed, and I do believe it's a hydrolyzed protein. I would tell you, I would take the approach that I took with the case study with Brian. We took him off of everything, put him on raw goat's milk and pumpkin and sweet potato for a week to 2 weeks. I've had cases. I had a case years ago of a basset hound that had red belly. He was so inflamed. His entire belly was completely red. And we put him on goat's milk for a month. That allowed time for the body to detoxify. And once we got him through that, we started gradually adding food back in. I would probably say one of the other things you could do is we carry a test kit called Yukari that you take care and you send it out, and it shows the intolerances. That a lot of dogs have. Well, not that a lot of dogs have, but it's a specific over-the-counter test to show the intolerances. It's a 32-page report that you could utilize to help once you get past this crisis of having your dog have itchy skin. We could start developing a plan for what foods are going to work best for them. The other test, which I don't sell in the store, it's more expensive, but it's excellent, is by Dr. Dodd and Hemopet, Hemopet. And that is a really comprehensive test for food intolerances and allergies. But of course, always check with your vet. And if they're totally opposed to whole foods, then try and find another vet that is going to be a little bit more knowledgeable, because again, many of the vets don't get nutritional training, or it's not a cornerstone, and they certainly don't get much. And if they do get it at school, it's presented by one of the big 5 human grade food companies.
Her dog also has a sensitive stomach.
Yep.
So she's wondering if you have any good idea for a substitute for the Royal Canin prescription diet.
We certainly have foods that would help, that are geared to food sensitivities. Farmina makes a very good digestive dry food diet that has some herbs, etc., added to it that are good. But I kind of still go back to, let's clear up the issue first, and then start reintroducing things to see if it's really a sensitive stomach, or it's brought on by having foods that aren't supporting the microbiome in the first place.
Pennye, as I started to say before more questions came in, thank you very much. Thank you to all of you for attending. And I will hopefully see you at one of our future webinars. Okay.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.